Remon, thanks for joining me today and agreeing to have a chat about managing cost allocation, which is one of the key things FinOps guys are generally occupied with. Clearly, it's hard to establish ownership and accountability for costs without being able to allocate them to specific teams or products. How do you manage cost allocation in your organization?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, great talking again. Cost allocation in our organization is generally divided between our mother company and then Nationale Nederlanden, who has a core competence doing that, and the business units we have around that, for which I represent one of them. The cost allocation generally works by our central organization taking the bill from AWS in our case, and they completely absorb it and they completely ingest it. We are taking ownership for our cloud environment and our cloud infrastructure strictly on an account basis. So in that sense, we have a very strict setup. Like there's only one owner for an account, and that one account, in the case of Amazon AWS, has ownership with one business unit. So in that sense, it's pretty straightforward to allocate that direct usage cost to a business unit using the software as well, and directly importing the data from AWS into an analysis system to do the divisions. There are obviously some surrounding aspects around that has to do with the way it just works when you do central billing, but that's the way we get allocated our costs.
Is there a need within your organization for a greater level of granularity on those cloud costs? Okay, if you have one account per business unit, then that's great because you can allocate the AWS invoice to the business unit without too much trouble. But what if the business unit has several different teams or supports several different products? Are you looking to get greater granularity in that reporting?
Good you ask. Yes and no. Depends on the viewpoint. Like we don't have, to be clear, we don't have just one AWS account or one subscription per BU. That was something that was tried in the earlier days of the cloud journey, and that worked, getting off the ground. But it very fast after that point it became clear that ownership would be hard to assess. And also indeed the cost allocation would be. So what we have done is that we have multiple AWS accounts, to just stick to my corner of the woods, and all of those AWS accounts are accounted to our business unit, and therefore they are charged as one to us. The business unit itself, like me representing FinOps in that case, we have a granular insight in each individual AWS account, and by applying a naming convention primarily, we are able to group them by product, by service. Not so much team, although that does happen sometimes. It's not ideal. We rather have them group it by a distinct naming convention. In our case, it's NNIP dash service name dash production or acceptance or test. And there are some more abbreviations to it, but that's the general idea of it. And we are able very easily to create filters on that as well. And the way we guide and we guard that consistency primarily is because we do have an account vending machine set up where we do have a toll gate approach. So the accounts are very easily created and we have it very fluently, but the final check is to actually make sure that there is a proper primary owner, a proper technical owner, the name is indeed correct, and that there is indeed the correct cost center assigned to it. And if it's a production account, a non-production account, or a sandbox, for instance. So we have all that data as metadata on the side. and not so much incorporated directly into the AWS accounts itself. That way we can find granular cost allocation, at least by what's running in the AWS account. And the teams themselves have all the liberty to actually apply more granularity using whatever means they want, just filtering on the service, adding tags, whatever. They are in charge of that internal structure in their AWS account. We do not have a need for it.
Right. So how do you feed back your cost information to the individual users as a means of reinforcing this ownership and accountability?
Yeah, there are various ways. So in this case, we really want to think from a customer's perspective, and not every customer and not every team created equally and consumes information the same way. But we did have to agree upon a few steps also with our security and control group. We are a financial institution. We want to have the overview, and we need to show that we are in control. So we applied at least 2 key controls with our setup. And the first one is that email is a very big thing still in our world. There's a lot of retention around it. It's traceable, etc. So we selected to create a cost report on the first in the first week of the month, which using the metadata which we collected on the front, which is in our case inside ServiceNow. We use it to generate Excel reports and essentially just, your accounts, you're the owner, these are the technical owners, these are your accounts, dear business owner, and these accounts did these costs in AWS as direct run cost in this month. And then you get the overview of all the months for this year included in one Excel. And that's emailed to them every month. That's one. The second one is that we applied a general cost alert. So for every account, we set a basic cost threshold for an alarm, and we raise that when they start using it by a trailing average of the last 6 months. And we feed that back into the ServiceNow again. So that's on an account level. And every other month, we refresh the alerts, which we then store inside the AWS account. So you can set a billing alert, and we just using some technology, lambdas, etc. We feed that into a static alert, and that alert gets to me, gets to the FinOps team. So me and my colleague, we take care of that. And then we go after it. So when an account does 200% of their usage, suddenly what they opposed to normal do, then we have a reason to check out what they're doing. So at least that's a stopgap solution to look. And besides all that, because that's pretty much reactive in a way, we have the information that is available to the teams themselves by looking at their cost data inside the tool. In our case, we have a cost management and insight tool called Cloudability, which we set up together with Group, so for the whole NN. And that gives both an insight and the ability to the teams to steer, but we also have then in place that they are actively informed what their costs are.
Right. So one of the questions that's being debated quite actively at the moment, given that cloud cost reports tend to be so very detailed and quite often very difficult to work with because of their size,
yes.
Is how do organizations check that the cloud provider is billing them correctly for the services they're using? I mean, most people who aren't involved with cloud finance would probably think that's a rather silly question, because ordinarily it's quite obvious what you're being billed for and whether the bill is accurate. But as we all know from very complex itemized phone bills, in practice, it can be quite difficult to check that you're being billed correctly for the service you're using. Do you have a process for validating the cloud bill, or do you think there should be such a process?
Well, obviously, you do want to have your check-ins, right? Not just because you want to see what people are doing, but also because there's a healthy a healthy need for validation of your cloud bill generally. You want to understand foremostly, and when you look at your regulatory requirements, it's also required that you provide evidence that you are in control. That means that you do regular reviews of your bill, and again, the reports that we generate are a part of that. It all mixes into that process. I do think you need to check. If not because you want to find something correctly, it's because you need to update your understanding continuously of how that bill is comprised and what it stands for. Within our situation where we are a business unit, we do not only have the runtime bill, which is being reallocated from our mother company, but we also have the added generic services bill from them, because they run centralized infrastructure, networking additions, and they have things like security systems as well, which we need to pay our share of. So that all comes into play looking at the total cost of ownership. If you just look at the general bill of your cloud provider, there's not just the fact that the cloud provider might be doing something wrong. They're dealing with 1,000 more customers, if not 1 million, besides yourself. But it's also that you're working, for instance, with marketplace vendors. We recently had an item with that, and there's people involved, so there might be mistakes. And when you are looking at marketplace subscriptions, things can quickly go south. Right? They can be very expensive. Thinking of big data appliances and all those kinds of services. And you really do need to check that consumption. And if that's actually done, and as there are subscription-based, there can be mistakes. So yes, absolutely check them. Create your dashboards in your favorite tool, and basically know each anomaly on a monthly basis for the mean, for the least. And check those anomalies and have them followed up. That will save you money, but it will also correct any mistakes, and you can have follow-ups, and that will assure that you are in control again.
Right. So when you look at the FinOps structure you've created in your organization, how do you assess its maturity right now? Would you say it was crawl, walk, run? Where would you position it on that scale in your mind?
Well, Mike, you're never done. Well, right. I think we're in a good place, but not the best place. So we're looking at regular intervals at the bills. There are a number of teams, if not most, who are actively aware of what they need to do and how they can go about it. And when I quiz them on it, so to speak, they do surprise me and at happy times and say, hey, no, we're doing this in this experiment. We are running this database now 24/7, but we actually have it marked in the calendar when we can reduce that again because X reasons, X, Y, Z. So I think we're in a good walking pace. Running is a next step. Running would be when we have a complete reserved instance purchasing, for instance, incorporated, like much more automation around it, which we are currently just not in a position time-wise to look at that. And when we really have a full coverage of every team allocated every month with a check-in, etc., like that mechanic, that's something I'm striving for, honestly, and we're not there yet, but I think we're getting there, and that's positive.
It's clear you've got a good vision for where ideally you would want to go. What do you think in treading that path? What do you think the biggest challenges you're going to face are? And are they generally people challenges, or are they technical challenges? What do you see as the big obstacles you need to get over to get towards that ultimate FinOps vision?
Well, in our case, as I explained, we're part of a mechanic, right? So we are a business unit within the greater business unit. So we're really making a good pace as well at the central level. But as there are much more business units involved, it's not so that we as a single item can really start running without, you know, having that central allocated resources and mechanics in place as well. So not saying it's holding us back, totally not, but we do need to take the other parts along, and that really brings me to the biggest challenge, is that this is a community effort, right? It's not me or my colleague at central business unit who can make this or break this. Like, this is really something that you need to incorporate in your, you know, in your culture in a bit. And that's a very slow process. Getting that into the DNA, you can force it, but then it still needs to be used. And there are business priorities. Like, not everybody the other day thinks about, oh, let me turn off that machine, or let me think about the way we can make this cheaper. What helps though is the whole process around it of assigning and creating owners. Like, people are owners, and when they feel they are owners and they can make a difference, then you can really start moving the needle in that sense, and then they get the overview, and then again can get the benefits as well from that, by being more freely about trying something new or looking at something exciting. You know, it's all over the place at the text in the FinOps.org site, right? Cloud FinOps is not so much a way of saving money. It's about controlling where your money is, and that you can do more with your investments. If we reach that, then the saving money part will come by itself as well.
Yeah. So on that journey, I think most FinOps practitioners feel that you need to encourage culture change, as you've suggested. It might be a long process, but bringing people's behavior into alignment with the plan using culture change initiatives is clearly a big part of the FinOps job. But also governance is a big part, isn't it? Putting controls and structures in place that guide activity. Now, you're in a highly regulated industry sector. How do you balance the need for governance and culture? How do you decide where the line is to put controls in place or encourage different behaviors using motivation and incentives? Do you see what I mean?
Yes. It's really something you need to kind of tag team on. Obviously, you know, at every journey where you want collaboration and a shared vision, you know, threatening with an I-risk registration, so to speak, isn't the first thing you bring to the table. You know, you have to share the vision why we're doing this, and everybody knows we're working in commercial companies here, most of us. You know, we all have the understanding that money going out that way isn't money spent on your initiative, your idea, or on you. That's simple and plain. So the need to control and to reduce the spend or to do it wisely is generally come across easily. But then making it part of a culture, maybe even fun to think about better ways to do things, and therefore also doing it with less expenditures. That can be turned into, well, I don't want to call it a fun exercise, but it's something challenging. You can challenge an engineering organization with that. And they can learn and grow to understand that it's part of the job. It's not just about making a cool feature, it's also making a cool feature in the right way. And right is making it in a secure, safe way, reducing risk and also reducing cost for the company, right, where you are part of. The alternative is indeed, like, if we don't do it, we will be running a risk. And that means also that things like compliance and governance, etc., come in play, and that has to do with the fact that a lot of means and measures are meant to secure access, for instance, or that others cannot have access, of course, and all those kind of things incur costs as well and risks. On the grand scheme of things. So yeah, people don't like that because it's a lot of work, filling out compliance forms isn't the most fun thing. People agree that working on it in a technical way is generally more the road to go than to get into the weeds with filling out governance paperwork.
So would it be fair to say then that perhaps at one end of the spectrum, there are probably jobs where governance is the best way of controlling what happens? At the other end of the spectrum, undoubtedly, there are things where you can't govern so easily, so it has to be motivation and culture you work on. And then maybe in the middle between those extremes, it's a matter of the culture of the organization and how, and maybe where you are in the FinOps journey and the level of regulation you're subject to that would dictate where the balance falls between encouraging culture change or controlling and governing. Is that a fair analysis, do you think?
I think so, yes. Yeah. There's always a balance to be struck, right? And we talked about this last week at the FinOps conference in Amsterdam. It's a balance. FinOps is one part of the equation of a table setting with all kinds of parts in it: education, security, governance, and then FinOps as well, commercial activities, the actual technology to deploy and run, how to deploy, how to do your CI/CD, etc. All that has relations to Cloud FinOps. It's part of the bigger setting, but it's a cornerstone though. Like without a FinOps setup, without a vision, essentially, how to approach it, you're just incomplete, and therefore you run a tremendous risk, as is as well. When you go through that journey of reinventing or moving, migrating to AWS, there's definitely certain phases and almost predictable events that happen, and those events will challenge actually if you are in control. And by doing your homework on the FinOps and doing your homework how a migration scenario or transition scenario will look like, you can build that trust with your financial organization as well, instead of them coming to you say, hey, why is this cloud bill just twice the amount that we forecasted in our year budget, or where is, if they're worried midpoint in the year, like, hey, if this keeps trending this way, I'm going to have to go to the CFO because this can't stand and we have to stop. So you have to have the preparation. You have to have that bigger view as well as part of the whole, to be able to say, no, look, this is expected. This will be right because we are going to now do these and these things to bring it back in control, and then it should slide down and we're there. But yeah, you do need to have that overview, and you do need to set up that. I would almost say you have to collect those credits.
So a FinOps leader needs, one of his key jobs has to be creating a vision for where the organization is going to go, and then being the leader, being the spokesperson, being the evangelizer of that vision.
At least the last one, yes.
Remon, that's great. Great to speak to you. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. You have a super day.
All right. Talk soon, Mike.